What if God and the Bible could help you design your legacy? Welcome this lovely morning to the Design Your Legacy podcast. My name is Angelina Carleton, and I have the pleasure to introduce you to Micah Dank. He was born in 1983 in New York, in the United States. From a young age, he wanted to be a writer, coming from a family of writers. His father was a producer and radio news editor at CBS News in Manhattan, and his grandfather was a producer at CBS News as well. He majored in English at SUNY Albany in New York and transferred down to the CUNY Hunter College in Manhattan to earn his bachelor's degree in language, literature, and criticism. It wasn't until he moved to Boston, Massachusetts, though, for a new job that he became interested in all of the esoteric sciences, including astrology, astrotheology, and today he's written 9 books. Welcome, Mr. Dank.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it is my pleasure to hold this conversation with you. And as I mentioned in the preamble, I like to have a variety of guests speak on this subject because legacy isn't just for one type of person or one type of demographic. And so I thought we might start with the question of, I think it was about a decade or so ago, and I'll let you kind of dive into your history, but you've been on quite a journey. So what are some of your biggest revelations and insights, or where would you like to begin today?
So I've gone through a lot spiritually. I've always been spiritual. I've always been kind of against religion. Even from being in temple at 9 years old, both my parents are conservative religious Jews. And I've always been against it. Like they would drag me to temple and they'd be just like deep into praying to God, eyes closed. And I'd look around and be like, what is this? This is ridiculous. And I don't regret my upbringing because it's taught me Hebrew and understanding that, which helps me break down biblical texts and all sorts of Gnostic texts, and understand the culture so I can understand the historical significance when I talk about the Bible on my channel. But it's always, the spirituality's always been there. And then when I turned 30 on my Saturn return, 29 and a half to 30 year Saturn return, I discovered my mentors and really good friends, Jordan Maxwell and Santos Bonocci, that taught me all about astrotheology. And I decided to dedicate my life to it. And astrotheology, the best way to describe it is it's basically the mythology of the zodiac. It's the mythology of the zodiac, the stories behind it, and the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell calls it, of the sun going through the 12 signs of the zodiac and the stories that it tells, which makes up the majority of the Bible and every ancient historical text. And I started deep diving into that. To this day, with astrotheology, I've decoded over 50 books. I actually have the Ethiopian Bible that I'm going to crack when I'm done with this interview, and I'm going to start going through that. It's just the basis of everything. It's really the language of the sky, the keys to everything. Huge piece of the puzzle. And that's what I do. I just teach to people.
Yes. So I think one of the revelations that you've come across is that some of the stories could be as old as time. So, for instance, Wonder Woman today in the movies could be connected to, I think you said Diana in Greece or
Well, in Greece, it was Artemis. She's based off Artemis. And Artemis, because, the Greeks and the Romans, they were very close. In time period, so were the Jews. In time period, a lot of things overlapped. And Artemis, who Wonder Woman is based off of, is Artemis in Greek. But in the Romans, she was known as Diana, which is why her name is Diana. And she was connected to a bunch of different things. A lot of astrotheology based things.
Yes, and I know one of the things is also, and I'll just provide this disclaimer right now, we're both working off of a Wi-Fi connection. So if the listener or viewer notices that it freezes occasionally, that's the reason why, for context. One of the things also that was an insight of yours is that you look at the Bible from a perspective, not so much literal, but figuratively, so as to pull the wisdom from it and not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because sometimes there has been, I think, presumptions that oh, well, Micah doesn't believe in God and he's an atheist, and it's not true at all. It's quite the contrary. So would you speak into this?
Yeah, it's not true at all. A lot of people, when they start discovering astrotheology, which is funny because off camera I was telling you how You would think that the left, that's always looking for ways to discredit literal religion, right? Anti-homosexuality, two cloths, two fabrics, wearing them at the same time. There's legitimate reasons why they say this stuff. And it's not always the truth. And I try and share this, but the funny thing is that you would think that the left would be flocking to this kind of stuff, instead of just emotionally reacting to how the religious right treats them. They'd want to fight it with logic. But the only platforms that I've been getting, and I've done over 700 interviews in the last 3 years, has been from the right. The right is actually interested. My biggest, I'm not going to say the letter, I'm just going to say number 17 in the alphabet. I did a lecture in front of 100 people at a meeting. And it's so wild because they think that once you can disprove literal biblical interpretation, suddenly that means you don't believe in God. Suddenly that means you're an atheist. It couldn't be farther from the truth. No atheist has ever, they don't care. My work speaks to people who are questioning things. My work speaks to people who are looking for answers or who fear retribution from source, for example. That's who I speak to. I don't speak to atheists. I don't speak to religious people who have their mind made up and don't want to hear anything from me. That's not who it is. But the amount of people that I've talked to, that I've affected their lives and changed, help them see things. Demystifying Satan, Baphomet, Lucifer, hell.
Yeah, I'd like to interrupt on that. And I'm just going to be spontaneous right now. This isn't in the list of questions, but I found it so interesting that the goat was a sacrificial goat. I did not know that historically. And so if somebody then projects on and says, we're going to lay our sins on this poor animal, it's not the animal's fault, but that's the historical reference. And then people assume that image automatically like a visual anchor.
Right. So how it basically works is that you've had child sacrifice for all of eternity. They always were done to appease the gods. In fact, they are still being done. And I'm not going to go too deep into that with things like the Bohemian Grove, which there's proof that they did it in the 80s. Proof that they did it in the 80s. You could read the book, The Franklin Cover-Up. Michael Scherter survived it, for example, all this kind of stuff. Human sacrifice or child sacrifice was a big thing to appease the gods. What happened with the Old Testament was you get to the story of Abraham and Isaac, where Abraham is about to strike down Isaac, and an angel stops him. And because of his faith that he was about to do it because God told him, at that point, God makes human sacrifice or child sacrifice irrelevant and transfers that ownness onto animals. Then what happens is throughout the Old Testament, you have all these sacrifices of animals. You have the goat, you have the bull, you have the lamb. Well, the goat is Capricorn. The lamb is Aries. I mean, a lamb is a baby ram. That's Aries. And the bull is Taurus. We can go into the ages of all this stuff too, but it's all astro-theology. And they would sacrifice these, and they say that the odor from the smoke would please the Lord, for example. What happens is when you start to get to the New Testament, when Jesus dies on the cross, he takes the sin of the world with him. So suddenly, child sacrifice is no longer needed. Animal sacrifice is no longer needed. Salvation is right there. It follows a pattern. It's misguided, but it follows a pattern. I hope that answers a little bit.
Yes. I just wanted to bring up some of the revelations. And I know that in your 9 books, you've been writing for, I don't know when you started writing, but it was like a book deal came about and then you kept writing, and it's done well in terms of the response on Amazon, the positive 5-star reviews. And then you just kept, I'd almost say, feeding a void of people who want to know. And if they can't find the truth elsewhere, then this is one of the reasons why you keep writing and
right. Well, I mean, the one thing that I'm very good at, Angelina, I have to say, is I understand optics well. I understand things like 4D chess. I understand multiple layers. I understand optics. So I have an English degree. I come from a family of writers. So I knew I was going to write about this. But when I was trying to figure out what to do, I know that Jordan Maxwell has written some books. He self-published. I don't think Santos has written any books. I know he sells DVDs. But the interesting thing is a lot of these people didn't understand what I figured out. And what I'd figured out is this, is I'd studied people like Philip K. Dick with Minority Report. I studied Brave New World, Huxley. I studied 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Jules Verne. I studied 1984, George Orwell, Animal Farm. I studied all this stuff. And what you'll realize is that if you want to cast a wider net, what you do is you write fiction. You write fiction stories. Now, I get accused sometimes of just trying to shill stories or just being an author trying to push his books, and that's fine. People don't understand it at that level. But you got to understand is if I were to write this in a nonfiction book, it would pigeonhole people. Only the people that searched AstroTheology would look at it. Whereas a fiction series where I basically blend Dan Brown, who's my literary idol, like the Da Vinci Code, with 1984, with a sprinkle of young, full of humor and spunk characters to teach this stuff, you can slowly plant seeds in people's minds without them even knowing.
Yes, and well, I think it's wonderful. I think that you're asking people to tap into their imagination, and you're inviting them to go on a journey. And even
That's
if
it.
it might be more of the right brain hemisphere, right, the right hemisphere, I think it's then it becomes less threatening because not that we'll necessarily get into the history of Jordan Maxwell, but he definitely went through a lot in his life for going up against the status quo. And if somebody
Right.
doesn't have to bring on that level of pain, yeah, why do it? So,
Oh, if I was teaching what I teach when Jordan started doing it, I'd be in jail by now.
yeah,
There's no
yeah.
doubt
Well,
in my mind.
yeah, well, some people could be very threatening. So let me say to you, Micah, astrology is a language. And if you understand this language, the sky speaks to you. I think that's a quote by Dane Ruddier.
Rudia.
Yeah.
Rudia, yeah.
So if you believe, so do you believe the sky is an encoded calendar? And then how do you define astrotheology? Because to many listeners, they may not have heard of it. And I've shared that my listeners are all around the world and many of them are under age 40.
Right. Okay. So the best way I could describe it is this. The sun tells the hour of the day. The moon tells the day of the month. And the zodiac that we're encased in, you cannot look out into the sky in any direction at any part of the day and look outside of the 12 zodiac signs. We could throw in Ophiuchus if you want, but that's usually not in the ecliptic. The zodiac tells the month of the year. It's a perfect celestial calendar. You know, these are fingerprints of creation. This is a creator. And all these books just explain, like, for example, just to go into it a little bit with astrotheology, like I mentioned, the mythology of the zodiac. Taurus is the bull. Because in the ancient times, when you would look into the sky and you would see the bull, it's as above, so below. You see the bull in the sky, you put the plow on the bull on earth and till the land, because that is when you plant the crops so that you can harvest during harvest season later on in the year. If you don't know to plant when Taurus is out there, when you see it, you're not going to eat at the end of the year. This is why in the Bible they always allude to dream interpretations, because they were so worried about their crops all the time. This is why people talk about the pyramids being like growing grounds for food. It was interesting too, because the pyramids, there was a guy in the south that had a farm and he put a pyramid on it and he planted things in the pyramid. It was just a regular limestone pyramid, nothing to scale by any means. And what he found was the crops that grew in the pyramid grew at 4 times faster than the other crops outside the pyramid. So it's an energy portal. The ancients knew a lot of science that we have forgotten or that has been pushed out of our consciousness. So what people want to do is keep you in your lower chakras. They want to keep you in your fear chakras. That's what they want to do. They want you to believe only in faith in God or Jesus or Muhammad. They want you to believe. Just believe and you'll be saved. That's not how this works. We have to save ourselves. And the truth of the matter is that the kingdom of heaven, or God, is inside us. Consciousness, we experience it with our five senses. You know, they're limited, of course. We only have an audio and a visual spectrum that's only like 1% of what's actually out there. We couldn't function if we saw what cats do, for example. Um, but it's basically all that. And the Bible, in its essence, is an encoded farmer's almanac for people thousands of years ago. It's got a lot of wisdom in it. There's 10 holy sciences within them. I only teach the astrology. Sometimes I go into the anatomical, but it's a lot. What I try and tell people is you guys aren't giving the Bible a complete chance. What I tell people is I'm not trying to disprove the Bible. I'm trying to tell you the Bible is more than you could ever imagine to learn in your lifetime. But it's not original and it's not history. And that's the problem that people seem to find.
So you would probably define then astrotheology as understanding that the art and science of the encoded sky. And I would probably say that I think today people have lost the connection to the ancient unless they seek it out, because unless it's, you know, a family member that leads them to it, it's yes, so easily lost in today's commercial landscape.
Well,
and
the funny thing is
people are seeking meaning. Go ahead.
A lot of books survive. We've lost a lot of literature. We've lost the Library of Alexandria, even though in one of my books I kind of posed that it was just moved. We've lost a lot of ancient literature. But here's the thing. The information is still out there in books, thousands and thousands of years old. They'll lie to you about what it's about. And if you'll notice in the religious communities, they don't want you to read because they don't want you to open up your mind to that level. And it's a very painful process, Angelina. It's a very painful process to unlearn things that, because when you grow up, you feel like society and the government and your parents and religion have your best interest in mind. And sometimes they don't know what they're talking about, or they're deliberately misleading you. And that's a very painful realization to come to when you realize that you've been shepherded in a specific way.
Yeah, thank you for that honesty. I think anytime, and I could even throw in might be a cheesy movie, but the Jerry Maguire movie, he talked about having the breakdown before the breakthrough. And for anyone who is a truth seeker, I think, and one of the questions that I wrote down regarding like friendships in life, sometimes, you know, we connect and we have relationships with certain people, but if we start to grow and they don't grow, then there's that distance. Or
I've lost most of my friends that I grew up with.
Yeah. And
I've lost most of them.
And it's also a conscious choice for people to want to continue to grow in their lifetime, no matter their age. So they're not just like, you know, big kids in adult bodies. And you probably know this firsthand, if somebody's not continuously growing forward, they not only can they be standing still, but they can also start to grow backwards if they're not pushing themselves to stay curious, to discover, and to challenge their own beliefs. And
what you'll find is that a lot of people that start waking up, as we call it, to things, what you'll find is that it is intoxicating. When you start to learn things that you've never learned before, and you realize how deep it goes, and here's the kicker, it never ends. There's always something more. Like, you ever see a pie chart where it's like things that you know, things that you don't know, and then 99% of it is things you don't know that you don't know. And that's basically how it is. You know, when you start to really get good sources and get some good information, it's addicting. You won't come back from it. When somebody wakes up, they don't come back. It's a new life path. It's a new, like, you want to talk about legacy. That's what it becomes. You're basically, that's the idea of being born again. What do you call it? Not elevation, but
enlightenment.
Enlightenment, raising our chrism, the pineal gland, the sacred oil, the Christ. Christ means anointed one, or oil in Greek. It's a sacred oil that climbs to your pineal gland. When you become enlightened, all sorts of things open up. That's ascension. That's what you call ascension. It's a spiritual one. Whereas what the Christian Bible will tell you is that it's a physical one, that people are literally going to start floating into the atmosphere at the end of times. And it's just such a horrible thing to teach people, because it's not true. at all. A lot of people that watch my videos or watch my channel on YouTube or have seen my breakdowns or my intro to astrotheology will tell me that it makes more sense than anything they've ever heard in church. There's a reason for that. It's because the universe is part of creation. And creation is orderly. There's rules and laws, and there's things that make sense. If something is so complicated that you have to jump through something called apologetics just to get your point across, it's Occam's razor, Angelina, and it's the simplest explanation. Now, this is not a simple explanation, but when you understand it, it is the explanation for everything.
Yes. Well, I'm thinking about things like the Fibonacci formula and other, the evidence is right there in nature. And yes, yeah, absolutely agree. I think when somebody does grow, it's very hard to go backwards because like an expanded mind, it's like you just don't want to shrink back. And then speaking
Right.
about humans, and yeah, sometimes I think with relationships, if one party does grow, it shines a light on where the other party hasn't grown. And then it's like, whoa, it's uncomfortable. It's like
Right.
even if you extend compassion, because yeah, okay. So thank you for speaking into the Bible being a farmer's almanac and how it can also be leveraged to lean into dream interpretation. So I think one of the points that I wanted you to speak into a little bit more is how we're not separate from God in consciousness.
So I have like a 10 to 15 minute thing that I've done on my channel. I don't know if you've ever seen my What is God
No, I
explanation.
haven't. So now I realize I just asked you to give like a concise little sound bite
It's
for
okay.
a 10-minute
Would you
video.
like me? Well, it's not a video. I mean, it's just a PowerPoint. I can read it to you if it makes I mean, it's as good of an explanation as you're going to find, but it makes sense.
Sure.
If you'd like me to read it to you, hold on, let me just open it real quick.
Yeah, I just think that in terms of consciousness, that there are a number of people that when they are able to realize that we're not as separate as we'd like to think, it changes their
We're
thinking.
not separate at all.
Correct. But it's very it's very interesting. So somebody could say, well, the beggar on that street, they're less than me, or that other person from that political party, they're separate from me. And then there's
Well,
all this division
that's just
today.
deflection. That's just deflection and projection for people's insecurities. That's all it is. It's just putting it's just putting a mirror in front of you. See, because here's the thing. A lot of people in the spiritual community, what do people do who don't have things that they can latch onto, right? They turn to drugs, they turn to sex, they turn to all this kind of stuff. And what kind of drugs? Heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, things of that nature. What do spiritual people do when they turn to that?
Well, it just
DMT.
fills the void. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but spiritual people, DMT, mushrooms, ayahuasca, marijuana. The thing about marijuana that's so interesting is that when we're sober, we have an ego. And the ego kind of can put a veil in front of you. Like you can be self-aware of your shortcomings and your issues, but it puts up a brick wall so that you can kind of function. But when you start to do these hallucinogens, those walls come down. All of them. Everything from marijuana to DMT, it strips your ego and it makes you face yourself raw. And how you view yourself is everything. And most of the problems in the world come from the fact that people don't have a purpose. People just go through the missions of life. They go through, oh, I got to go to school. Now I got to have a family. Now I got to do this. They're wonderful things, but they're distractions at the end. There's people that do soul and spiritual work. These are the ones that really don't have to worry. So if you'd like, I can read you this explanation about what is God. I wrote the first part when I was 29. Now I'm turning 40, and I kind of finished it up. If you'd like me to explain it, I could just read it to you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, hold on.
And I don't know what time frame you're working on right now.
So what's God? This is from my first book. I'm sorry?
Oh, I think there might be a 3-second delay. I'm not sure what type of time frame you have right now. So yeah, please go ahead. The window is open.
Okay, so this is from my first book, Into the Rabbit Hole Beneath the Veil. My series is called Into the Rabbit Hole. So I'm going to read this to you. I wrote this when I was 28, 29. Scientists have determined through completion of the Genome Project that humans are roughly 99.7% identical-wise. Two penguins are more genetically different than you and I are. Whomever finds this, I want you to try this experiment. Write your name down. Write your two parents' names down above yours. Now you have 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and you go on and on. Let's go back 35 generations. It roughly takes you back to the year 840 AD. Simple math, you will have 137 billion people. So we know something's off. Now, the number of ancestors list reminds me of the story of the servant summoned by the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was pleased with how the servant was doing and wanted to reward him. Serving you is all I desire, sir, the servant insisted. No, I insist that you ask for something. Anything you desire, the Pharaoh said back. This went back and forth for a while until the Pharaoh got mad and threatened punishment. After thinking long and hard, the servant, seeing a chessboard in front of him, said, on day 1, I would like 1 piece of rice. On the second, I would like 2. Each day you will double the previous days until the chessboard is complete. I will place a grain on each square representing each day completed. The first day, the Pharaoh sent his finest servant in a parade with a golden pouch to deliver the grain. The amount grew exponentially, and halfway through the board, there was no more grain in the land. The Pharaoh summoned the servant back in. Your Highness, all I ever wanted to do was serve you, replied the servant. The servant, although now the wealthiest man in all the land, had retained his hubris. It was there that the Pharaoh learned not to question humility or assume that giving material gifts as tokens of appreciation were all that mattered. As for the servant, he continued to work for the Pharaoh until he died. However, he had taken all the rice and continued to feed all the poor and the homeless until the day of death. The point of both these stories that I've just told you is that it is simple math. In fact, it is how cells divide in your body and mass produce. The reason I stopped at this particular time frame, 840 AD, is because it's roughly how many people it's been calculated that have ever lived on planet Earth. 140 billion people. Remember, we got to 137 billion people. It's simple math. You can literally do it with a calculator. So even if we take the Bible literally, we still need to get to the day of creation, which is October 23rd, 4004 BCE. So we're in a bit of a jam here. There needs to be a way to bridge the gap. And this is where a theory called the pedigree collapse theory comes in. The concept states that there is no other explanation than a whole lot of incest. Sometimes, like in the case of the Kentucky Blue people, there are no branches in the family tree. Sometimes, like in the banking or royal families, it's to preserve money or special genetics. Based on our DNA, geneticists say that the furthest point one can be on this planet from another is 50th cousins. If your mom was from country X and your dad was from country X as well, there is a 20% chance they share a common ancestor within 10 generations back. So, Angelina, what does this all mean?
We're all family. I'm sorry, go
In a
ahead.
nutshell, it means far enough back we are all related and we are all should start acting like it. So let's explore different cognitive viewpoints. How about from a creationist then? It's all the same stuff. Well, we all came from Adam and Eve. Technically, Eve from Adam's rib, and even more technically, Adam was made from mud and dirt from the world God created. How about from an evolutionist then? Let's start with the Big Bang. Let alone the fact that all the material we came from was an infinitesimally dense singularity, and nobody seems to want to explain where their singularity came from, but we'll let that slide. We were all one at one point. How about the idea of source energy? If our souls are like crumbs off a cookie, the cookie being source, God, whatever you want to call it, then we are all connected multidimensionally. And upon death, it will be a vibrational change of frequency back to it. Let's try one last one. Aliens placing us here. You would still have to account for the first humans and how we came about. You don't just magically have a species, poof, we're here, or do you? If so, who created this first test group of people? Secondly, what about the first spirit consciousness of DNA that's evolving this level of higher thinking? There is a big difference between here and a monkey who's fed up with people taking pictures of him and throwing his you know what at them. Still, though, The point is that some things had to come back to a singularity in the sense of one source of point. Humans are so quick to think of the end of the world, things ending. But what they can't do is think about the beginning, or if there was something before what we know as a beginning. So this I wrote when I was 29. This was in my first book. And it is very close to the ultimate truth. It is very close to it, but it's not the whole thing. So let's explain this. First, we need to define God. And before we even do that, we need to define God as even existing. That's the first step. So the sun tells the hour of the day, the moon tells the day of the month, the zodiac tells the month of the year. Aside from the fact that DNA is a computer blueprint from life, and that we have a perfect calendar in the heavens, in the middle of nowhere where we are in the Milky Way galaxy, there is a perfect calendar for us to figure out. These are fingerprints of creation. These are fingerprints of God. So we defined God as existing now, but where is God? Well, it must be beyond space and time, beyond the 11 dimensions of string theory. Ask any religious person to define God. This is where you get them, Angelina, if you ever want to have a conversation with someone. Ask any person, religious, to define God, and they will tell you, among other things, that God is infinite. And here is where you get them. God is infinite. How can something exist outside of infinity? It can't. The biggest lie we've been taught is that we are separate from God, that we should fear it, that we are separate from it. We are a part of it. Many of you have children. They are literally half of your DNA, so they are a part of you. But you experience them subjectively outside your body. And so is with God with us. A piece of God comes down in what we call consciousness into a body, and we feel separate from it. We are all God experiencing itself subjectively. Think about this. God is infinite. If you are a culmination of everything in creation, how can you experience something new? You can't. Not space, not time. What do you do if you're everything? The key to life, the reason humanity exists, the reason we exist, is because God tricks himself or itself into a body, forgets everything that it knows, comes to earth and experiences creation subjectively. That is the only answer of why creation exists. Everything to experience everything. Because at the top level of God, where you're everything, you can't experience something new. This is how you trick yourself into thinking you can experience something new. We are a species with amnesia living in a simulation. Einstein said about God that he believes in the God of Spinoza. So Baruch Spinoza was a thinker who said that God doesn't want you huddled in churches and temples in the cold, praying as loud as you can with others, praying the loudest. In the Bible, Jesus said that those that give for publicity or pray the loudest, they have their reward. What that basically means, or his parable, what that basically means is people who give for publicity or pray the loudest, the attention they get back is what they're doing it for. Their ego is fulfilled. It's not for the right reasons. If you pray, pray by yourself. Spinoza's God wants you to go to the mountains and the lake and enjoy what I am created for you and worship that way. The biggest lie we have ever been collectively taught is that we need to fear and worship. Now, here's another thing. When we are a baby, we are in our mother's womb. The mother, being the supreme being, is aware of the baby. However, the baby is not aware of the mother from its vantage point, as is with us, with God. We're in the middle of creation. We are each a piece of God, a piece of the infinite, unaware of the whole because we're in the middle of it. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Alan Watts, but Alan Watts was a thinker, and he said the following. Jesus Christ knew he was God, so wake up and find out eventually who you really are. In our culture, of course, they'll say you're crazy and you're blasphemous, and they'll either put you in jail or in a nut house, which is basically the same thing. However, if you wake up in India and you tell your friends and relations, my goodness, I've just discovered that I'm God, they'll laugh and say, oh, congratulations, at last you found out. There's another thinker out there who I've been trying to get on my channel for a little while, but she's been busy. Her name is Nargis Allegria. She says the following. To become absolute, you have to accept that you are God, that there is only God. You have to admit that others are gods too. But if your love does not stretch that far and you are blinded by your shadow, don't complain that liberation did not happen yet. Why should freedom reveal itself to someone who refuses to embody love? When you are ready to perceive God in everything, you have opened a gate that opens the possibility of being eaten raw by the absolute. And here's the kicker. Here's where you get a lot of the religious people. P.S. Everything you hate is God too, because there is only God. Anything that you think should not be happening is God, because there is only God. Realizing there only being God and it will prevail, first in your experience, then in the collective. Angelina, they tell you this in the Bible, but people don't know how to read it the right way. Isaiah 45:7. I form the light and I create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Everything in existence, the good, the bad, everything is a part of God. All of it. Religious people can't admit they are God. Only Jesus and God are God. But how can something exist outside the infinite? Now, string theory used to be the most cutting edge quantum physics 20 years ago, and it talks of 11 dimensions to make it work. Now, the most cutting edge quantum physics states that the universe is conscious. Well, welcome to the party. Incidentally, Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus from Egypt, talked about string theory 6,000 years ago. If you've ever read the Quantum Hermetica, the third Hermetic principle is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything vibrates. This is a vibrational pattern. It's not alive in the sense that we are, but it's a part of the infinite, making it a part of God. We're experiencing itself. That's what it is. You are God experiencing itself subjectively through amnesia. The book of Thomas, saying 77, split a piece of wood and I am there. Raise up a stone and you will find me. God is everything, the wood, the stone, and this now makes sense. The Quran 532, they too say it. This is why we decreed for the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul without it being guilty of manslaughter or corruption on the earth is as though he has killed all mankind. And whoever saves a life is as though he has saved all mankind. Remember, we're all one. We're all God, and this makes sense now too. Matthew 25:40. Truly I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. We are all one. This makes sense now. We are all God, therefore we are all infinite and eternal. This thought process hits people at different times in different ways. When you realize you are eternal and you are God, just as the enlightened have realized in the past, Buddha under the fig tree, Vishnu, I can go on. It's all the same story. You get filled with love. You no longer fear death and you're driven to love one another. Not because of fear and punishment like the religious. The biggest mystery of life is sitting in front of you in plain sight. The religious texts all allude to it, but they never just come out and say it. You also have to understand, this is really important because this helps you understand the religious mindset. When you come to the realization that you are eternal, you are infinite, you are part of God, you are loved, all that, you get filled with love. That feeling you get is the exact same feeling that religious people get when they become saved or fall into a new religion when they convert. Only they are ruled by fear. There's a reason they're called God-fearing Christians. This is why it's so hard for them to let go of the holy books as a literal text. We're all God interacting with itself. We are eternal and infinite and powerful. We use DMT, hallucinogenics, to see other realms and connect with God on a higher plateau. We meditate to lose the voice in our head so we can be the one with the all. This is the secret of life, everything I just shared with you. And the meaning of life, Angelina, is to find your gift. And the purpose of life is to give it away. And that was Picasso. And that's the explanation that I give.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. And so here's my next question for you is if, or as you are one in 8 billion people approximately, tell me about your angle then on the word legacy when you were the best version of yourself in your body now.
Thank you for the softball question. Let's see here. I'm just trying to be as authentic as I can. I'm just trying to always choose love, uh, which is very hard when you're in a controversial field like I am. The pushback from the you want to talk legacy? It's the pushback from the legacy people, the people that'll point to 2,000 years. My best friend that I'm no longer friends with, I was his best man at his wedding. 30 years we were friends. One of the last things he told me before he stopped speaking to me when I started giving lectures about this kind of stuff was, he said, do you know how many more brilliant minds came before you came around? Do you think that maybe they know more than you do? And that kind of thinking slows humanity. It really does. I haven't spoken to him in years.
Yeah, that reminds me of the metaphor about the crabs in the bucket and just people pulling one another down, whether that's the power of jealousy or it is another reason. Yeah, which is unfortunate because he could have walked with you on your path and journey.
Right. I've met and talked to a lot of people whose lives I've changed with my work. I have certain people in my life that I talk to and I share every time someone sends me like um, a video or a email or a DM in social media about how my work has changed them, changed their life for the better, how happy they are, how much they love me. And I think a big part of my legacy that I'm trying to do right now is to stay humble with it all. To be honest, hundreds and hundreds of messages. I save them all, to be honest with you. And sometimes when I'm having a rough day, I'll just flip through them and read them and just see what kind of a positive change I'm making to people. Um, People are starved for answers because they know that what we're being fed in public is not the truth. They know this, they just don't know where to look.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's awesome that you're saving it, whether it's a compliment jar or if it's just a file folder on your computer. Yeah, because it is that human connection of knowing that you have made a positive impact on someone else's life. And one of the questions I have for you later on is, based on identity, but I just want to circle back for a moment and ask you, how do you define legacy for you in this lifetime? And you may have hinted at it before, but I'm just circling back again because here you are and you have studied and read and asked tough questions.
Right. Legacy, it's interesting that you say that because off air we were talking about it and I said, I'm turning 40. I'm 20 to 25 years younger than the next astrotheologist out there. Um, I've been told from a lot of people who follow these other people too, besides just me, that my work is very easy to understand because it's extraordinarily complicated, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm very good at breaking it down. Um, like I said, I've only been teaching this for 3 years, and I've had so many interactions and just large platforms and things of that nature. Um, I honestly don't know where it's going to go. I honestly don't know where it's going to go. To be honest with you, there's some people that can figure it out, but this is kind of like this is an ancient science, but I'm kind of pioneering the way that I do it and teach it. I couldn't tell you. All I could tell you is that I kind of reflect every 6 months to a year how far I've come, and I'm always just blown away. So I have no idea where this is going. I have no idea what the legacy will be. I hope it's a positive one. I don't even consider myself an author, Angelina. I don't, even though I have 9 books. I have 8 books. It's an 8-book series, Into the Rabbit Hole, and a kid's book called A is for Aries that I wrote with my astrologer.
Maybe
It's
it just
teaching
feels surreal.
It does. I've done a lot. I've had a lot of really wonderful compliments. It's opened my world up to a lot of people and a lot of things. But I couldn't tell you where this is going to go. Hopefully to the moon. You know.
I just want to acknowledge you for a moment that you're aware of it, like you're in it, and you can pull out whether that's 6 or 12 months and then observe and look at yourself from an outside perspective. Because I think that in terms of speaking about consciousness, it is that ability to, be aware of what it is you are doing and creating and writing and speaking and sharing, and compared to just going through life like Groundhog Day and oh, it's another day.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Every day is a new chapter. I always get to meet new wonderful people. Um, at this stage of the game, they're coming to me. Like when I
yeah,
first
it's like
started,
you're riding the river of the ether.
doing this, I would reach out to a lot of podcast hosts. I basically just took over Twitter, started like DMing all these conspiracy podcasts and different types of truther podcasts, and so many of them were open to it. And at this stage of the game, I've got bigger channels coming to me. You know, it hasn't cracked mainstream, although I don't really care for that, to be honest. But I do have some things planned to get the word out, because the thing that a lot of these astrotheologists have out there is I don't think they have a marketing mind like I do. They don't really know how to get this out. They just kind of share and let word of mouth go. Jordan started teaching this in 1959. You know,
But he did not have a
think about
commercial marketing angle.
right. The whole fiction book series, Wake People Up Slowly, the YouTube channel. You know, I'm young, I'm personable. You know, I know my strengths and I know my faults. You know, I've got friends and I've got people that have come into my life that I let that kind of keep me honest and kind of, you know, but it's never like ego getting too big, to be honest with you. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with they tell me that I never take time to step back and appreciate myself. I've been trying to do that a little bit more. But yeah, it's always great talking to new people and just teaching them things. You know, teaching them things that I've figured out. Like I said, I don't consider myself an author. I just have a story to tell. You know, and that's kind of what I've been doing. I'm an astrotheologist, Bible decoder. I break disinformation, real disinformation, and it's growing. I know a lot of people know my name and my stuff, and I just want to keep sharing it with people.
Yeah, yeah. So, Micah, let me ask you this. Are conspiracies an answer to our fears in the times humanity feels conditioned, helplessness or hopelessness? I wonder if that's the draw. Like people are drawn to the JFK conspiracy, which is interesting because I think in one of your prior podcasts you mentioned like it was either like your grandfather or someone who got the story first, like by 10 minutes or
Yeah,
something. But so I think people are drawn to conspiracies. It's like a mystery. And so I think one of the
yeah.
questions we have given your 9 books is could it be an answer to our fears when humanity feels helpless
I
and
always say that conspiracies are basically Alex Jones plus 6 months.
okay?
That's what I basically say. It's just someone comes out with it, you think it's crazy, 6 months later it's proven, and then something else comes along to distract you from it. Because it's always
Interesting.
about people have such a short attention span nowadays, and it's always what's the new thing in the news. People haven't broken by or away from the mainstream media's narratives. It still shapes people. You know, I follow a lot of really wild leftists and really wild right people on Twitter to remind me to ignore that stuff and stay in the middle. When you see just how their whole personality is about my side winning, they always like to set up a dichotomy, a division between two sides. The best thing that you could say that the elites have done was found a way to keep this country 50-50. Because when a country starts when something starts hitting 80-20, then you see the riots in Paris, you see things of that nature. No, they want to keep people divided and in fear and enslaved mentally. It's a prison.
Well,
And
fear is a very powerful energy and emotion that a lot of times people don't have the tools to know how to unpack and unwrap.
right,
If you add trauma to that and they don't have the tools to unpack that trauma, it's like just passing that baton to the mailman and the next generation and to the dog and then to
right,
the public park. And what I mean by the public park is that, you know, humans can sometimes, if they don't know how to take care of that energy, that fear energy, they just keep passing it forward. But yeah, let me ask you for a moment though, is a part of your legacy design figuring out these puzzle pieces?
um, I'm at the point right now where I'm running out of ancient texts to go through. Um, that's not entirely true, to be honest with you. Like, there's endless Sumerian texts. I've only done 3 just to prove a point. Um, but basically, to find new information to bring, it's more just basically spiritual stuff. It's more teaching you to love yourself, to understand thoughts, what they are, things that stuff they don't teach you. I just want to make positive impacts on people. What I like to tell people is that I break down disinformation. I bring, because all this kind of stuff is in the holy books. It is. They're just spoken about in parables, and they keep people divided from believing in it literally or understanding where it's really coming from, what it actually means. That's basically what it all is. Whereas what I do is I expose all this stuff because people keep just writing in metaphors, and the problem is that people aren't getting them, over time, so they just become argument fodder. Whereas I basically break everything down. Like I said, I don't consider myself an author, even though I've written 9 books. But what I do consider myself is somebody that breaks down conditioning and kind of removes fear from people's lives. That's kind of what I like to tell people my legacy is.
Good, good. Oh, that's the soundbite right there. Yeah. So I was going to ask the next question: is your legacy helping others wake up by your example and the clarity of who you are? Because as much as our words matter, people also watch what we do. Or as that 17th letter says,
Yeah.
show me.
Yeah. What I want people to do, what I do on my channel is basically this: is I'll bring up a topic, and I'll tell you some stuff on the topic. And what I want you to do is, I'm not going to give you all the answers. What I want to do is start generating that part inside your body, that fire that makes you research and look things up yourself. Because you'll send yourself down emotional and mental journeys. And that's what I want to facilitate. I want to start waking people up.
That's lovely. Yeah. And I think I would just say by your example, because, you've had to walk through the growing pains of, that this wasn't just easy. So you can embody it and just speak into it, whether you've got your notes or not. Or if you remember in the 80s or the 90s, do you remember Cliff Notes?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of giving the Cliff Notes these days. Yeah, another thing, and I don't know if I brought it up yet, but while I pressed the record button, but in our preamble, while we were chatting, I mentioned to you many people do not have the time or the space to let a legacy in. It's kind of like I said, talking to God. Can they wrap their mind around it? Because in today's commercial landscape of where people have the attention of a goldfish, the TikTok videos and what is it that they're going to buy? It's being able to slow down and think bigger and deeper. And you're right. I think people are starved for answers, and they'll
Yeah.
start to look.
Um, like I said before, Picasso's quote: "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away." And I think it's that simple. I think it's that simple. I think people don't look within. That's where the hole in their heart, and that's where the longing, the void comes in, and that's where it's filled with drugs, sex, and alcohol.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you want to know the number one thing that holds people back from designing the legacy?
But
It's limiting beliefs.
yeah. See, the thing is that whether you think you can do something or you think you can't do something, you're right on both aspects.
Because the person will
You know,
find the evidence to support it.
the person that succeeds has failed more times than you have even tried. That's what it is.
Yeah.
People give up at times and they don't realize how
Close.
close they were.
Yeah. Yes. Your books are classified as science fiction as they cover
Are they
remote.
really?
uh,
I didn't even know that.
I think they're classified as science fiction.
Okay.
Um, as they cover remote viewing and shared dreaming. So one of the questions I had is, what are some of the guiding principles as old as time and the underlying messages, and or what is one guiding principle of your life's legacy?
So I mentioned that God is everything. The creation. We are in the creation. Um, and what I would say to that is mathematics governs the entire universe. It's a natural law. Mathematics does sacred geometry patterns. You mentioned Fibonacci and all that kind of stuff. I go into that on my channel too. Um, but mathematics guides everything, and karma is the law that puts everything in place. Karma is real. It doesn't work the way people think it does. but what you put into the universe, you get out. So always try and use love and positivity. Now that's impossible in our day and age, especially if you're going to have a unique thought. You're going to have people that don't like it. There's going to be controversy. The bigger you get, the more people that are going to come after you. That's just
Because of
basically
that
how it is.
projection within them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're shining a light on something they don't like that's ugly in themselves.
Or they just don't believe in themselves. Like if you dare design a legacy, Micah, why don't I have one?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you have a big red fire truck, where's mine? That's not fair that you
Yeah.
have it.
Right.
Yeah. And then we're back to who do you think you are, right?
You'll find the people who are in you know what the other thing is too, Angelina? The people that changed the world since the beginning of time, the people that make the biggest changes in the world are not educational. The people who make the biggest changes in the world are all self-taught, all of them. That's what they are, because you get the information from source. Um, they're always self-taught. You're never, ever going to have a unique idea in academia. You're never going to do that. The people that change the world. And it's as one of my favorite channelers, Bashar, says. He says, oh God, it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, how many people um, have changed the world who didn't go against the norm, who weren't labeled crazy?
Oh, I think the Steve Jobs says to the crazy ones, but keep going.
Yeah, it's true. Um, just being authentic, because you know what? When you start to sell your soul a little bit, and that takes on a whole bunch of different forms. But when you're unique and authentic, people can't take that away from you. When you know that you're an eternal, infinite being, there's nothing anyone can say or do to you. The fear comes in line with, everybody, that's what childhood is, right? Everybody thinking they're going to live to be forever, right? That's kind of like the blessings of childhood, right?
Well, I think there's some, yeah, business owners that don't want to wrap their mind around that they might be mortal and they have to pass on the baton in succession. But keep going.
Right. Well, that's what a lot of people do.
In human nature.
A lot of people's legacies are their families, and that's fine. That's a form of creation. You don't have to write a book. You go create a child, raise them. That's fulfilling. That's a form of creation. There's some people that need more than that, though. It's not an answer for everything. I can't imagine myself not wanting to understand things. Like, I hate not knowing things. So what I do is I take my weakness and turn it into a strength. I'm always learning new things from new people, giving credit. I'm a big fan of handing out roses. I don't know if you know that term.
Is that giving credit and kudos to other people?
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Because nowadays people always try and pawn ideas off as their own. That's not what I'm about.
Yeah, that's a very nice guiding principle. What did you call it again about the roses?
Oh, it's called giving your roses.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. We need to live in a society where people edify other people as second nature more.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of my final questions for you is, so I would opine that you have a good imagination when it comes to writing your books. So what do you imagine when you think about your legacy, let's say on the final day?
I just want to. My biggest legacy is I want to free people of fear. That's what I want to do. I want to free people of irrational fear, things that can be logically explained. That's what I want to do, and that's what I've been doing. The books are that's just a medium. Like, they're good stories, and I think it's a new genre. It's very deep and interesting, but they're books. It's just to slowly wake people up. When people start coming to my channel and hear the spiritual stuff and understand this. Like, the funny thing is, Angelina, people always use the phrase "new age." None of this stuff is new age. This is all ancient stuff.
It's woo woo.
Yeah, right?
So if your books aren't classified as science fiction, what are they classified as?
No, I've never actually looked into what they were classified as.
Oh,
I guess it kind of, I guess it makes sense because I do talk about like 40 different esoteric sciences built in. So I do that.
well, I think it also helps people to understand what it is that they, it's like, what is the water that we swim in? What is this culture? And if in and since so many things are hidden in plain sight, sometimes people need
Yeah.
a decoder. The other thing is a lot of times people they work 40, 50 hours a week and they don't have the time to do the research. But you're right, come late at night or the early hours of the morning, their mind starts to get curious, like, well, what about this and why is that? And but if they don't have the time to research, they have to rely on other people that have gone before them because they don't have that energy and time and so forth. So let me
Right.
ask you one of these. I think this is one of the final questions. So, what values do you get to honor by developing your purpose and leaning into it? Because when I talk about legacy, it's a holistic. It's not just financial planning and your governance documents, will, health directive.
So ask me that one more time.
Sure. What values do you get to honor by developing your purpose and leaning into it today?
Um, I feel like the bigger my work gets, I feel like the bigger that I get. Um, the more deep I understand things, the lonelier I was getting. Um, when you're pioneering things, there's not many people that you could talk about or talk to about. What you can do, though, is you can talk to people about what you have figured out. But in reality, we're all on our own journey, you know? And I just want to put myself in the best possible light in order to in order for people to take it seriously. If I didn't practice what I preached, if I was just out there getting drunk all the time, I don't drink. If I was out there doing drugs all the time, I don't. If I was out there having sex all the time, I don't. If I was doing all this stuff but railing against it, how would you take me seriously? You know, it's it's always self-reflection. It's always self-reflection, and I am hard on myself, and I do have a small group of people that I keep around me that I've met online or that have reached out to me that I've helped, and they kind of talk to me and keep me in line. Um, I'm very lucky, to be honest.
To bring you back to center, I might say some of your values could include truth, innovation, relevance, self reflection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Any closing thoughts, Mr. Dank?
Yeah. This problem of the um, to be honest, because of topics, and it's on a myriad of different things. The questions are very well worded. Um, it's been very wonderful. Um, I don't know. I wish more people gave chance to the kind of stuff that I was talking about. If that makes any kind of sense, because it is very controversial. People always have fear in the back of their mind. This makes sense. But what if? What if? Like, you always get that thing from the religious people, right? It's called Pascal's wager. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but Pascal's wager basically says um, that wouldn't it be better to believe and be wrong than not believe and suffer your life in hell? And that is just the wrong way to think of things. That stifles you. That keeps you. Does that make sense? That kind of keeps you down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you. That's a great quote.
Right. What I'm gonna do is let me just send this to you real quick. Hold on.
Do you want me to share it on the screen? Well, while you're looking for it, I'll just banter and
No,
share. Oh,
please tell me this worked. I'm
yeah,
awful
it's
with
I
computers.
see it in
You
chat.
wouldn't think.
I see it in chat. But let's see. It
Yeah, I
looks
just
like
want to make sure the video comes.
It looks like it needs me to sign in. Do you need me to sign in?
Oh, no, 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 no. I could find this. Hold on.
Because I think
Oh,
it's
no. You know what I did? I sent you my, ignore that. Let me send you another one.
okay. I'll delete it. No big deal. Okay. Okay. All
Just
right.
make sure. This is my introduction video to my work. It's 2.5 hours long, built-in breaks for it. I built in breaks so that you can pause it, reflect. I know it's heavy stuff, but this is what I do. If you want to share this link with your listeners,
I'll put it in the show
you could
notes.
share my yes, and you could share my social media too if anybody has questions. I answer. This is the other thing that I do, Angelina, is I answer every single person that reaches out to me. Every single person, whether it's email or DM or social media post or anything.
Yeah,
I just try and help everyone. So if you want to share that link,
I would be happy to. Yeah. I just want to, as we wrap up our conversation, just to say thank you for bringing your authenticity. I think one of my favorite parts of this conversation was when you spoke about the difference between the types of drugs that are out there. So whether
yeah,
somebody these days are escaping through, let's say, cocaine or eh, others, I don't even want to open up the whole fentanyl thing that's happening in North America right now. But compared to filling the void with searching out truth, even if it might be
right.
taboo socially in terms of the status quo. Money alone can't fill that void.
No.
Pardon if there's a
Money doesn't fill a void. Money doesn't do anything for you. All money ever does is make you more of what you already are. I'll put it to you this way.
correct.
So
So for the
if
people who are
you're
empty, go ahead, please. Yeah.
yeah, so for example, right? Me and you are alcoholics and we're at a bar and we're drinking together, right? I run out of money. Our drinking night is over. But if you have a lot of money, who knows where that ends? Money money just makes you more of what your soul already is, of who you already are.
Unless somebody can redirect.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or unless you do it yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for I'm going to utilize the phrase of positive role model because I think that anyone who has the courage to walk down a path and seek out the truth, it's not always convenient. It's not always a walk in the park because, like you had said, your associates and your friends around you shift and change, and that is oftentimes when those emotional bonds get broken. There can be,
Yeah.
a beautiful, it can be greener on the other side, but that path there, it's a hard one, and you've braved it. So I just would like to thank you for speaking so openly today on my podcast.
Thank you. What you'll find too is that when you start living your own truth, what you'll find is that people will find you whose views align closely with yours, and then you can talk to them. You know, you. It was a line from the show House, where there's a woman that had been raped, and she only wanted to talk to Dr. House, right? And one of the lines she said was, "Life is a series of rooms, and who you're stuck in the room with at the current time adds up to what your life is."
That's deep. That's deep. So I will just read out my closing paragraph if you're all good, or do you have any other
Yep.
closing thoughts?
No, no, we're good.
Okay, all right. So I have to be commercially minded right now. So
Mm-hmm.
okay. So in closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, USA, but international in those I consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moot around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please remember to rate and review. Or if you're checking us out on YouTube, please remember to subscribe, comment, and like this video. So thank you so much for joining this week. And thank you, Micah, for speaking into your legacy.
Thank you for having me.